Hey, welcome to Grace Bomb Part 2. I have here the official guide for grace bombing your neighbors. A few do's and don'ts. So if you look at the graphic, you see do, give them a surprising gift meant to brighten their day, as opposed to don't, give them a prank gift meant to annoy them in a grace bomb card. That's not a good combination. A second one, do give them an act of service like watching a pet along with a grace bomb card. Don't give them a pet and a grace bomb card. Now, quick time out here. I don't know if you've noticed, but on the good side, the do side, the pet is a dog. And on the don't side, notice the pet is a cat. I think there probably is a lot of meaning to that. But what this is illustrating for us is that, keeping in mind that this gift that we give along with the grace bomb card, that could be a physical gift. It could be money. It could be an encouraging word. It could be your expertise. It could be your time. Anything that says, hey, I'm thinking about you and I want the best for you. All right, here's another one. Do give them an encouraging note to lift their spirits, as opposed to don't give them a critical note and a grace bomb card. Yeah, don't do that. Or one more, do send a gift to their workplace or home along with a grace bomb card, as opposed to the don't side. Just give them a grace bomb card without a gift or an act of love. We want to combine the grace bomb card with an act of love or a gift. All right, hope that helps, makes some sense. Last week, we talked about the instruction manual for grace bombing, 3 basic steps: load, listen, and let her go. And today we're going to look at Jesus, the master bomber, who gives us the ultimate examples of loving our neighbors, and interestingly enough, follows that same pattern of load, listen, and let her go. So let's look at Jesus, all right? First, Jesus loaded. Practically speaking, for grace bombing, being loaded means having the cards on you so you're ready to go. But it's also being prepared and making the decision to be aware of the people around you. That's part of being loaded. You're prepared for this. You've got your cards, but you've made that decision. I'm open and I'm going to be aware to what's going on and the needs of the people around me. Well, Jesus did that. So Jesus first got loaded or prepared with a physical body at his incarnation. John writes, "In the beginning was the Word." Now that phrase, the Word, that's another name for Jesus. So I'm just going to put Jesus' name into this verse as I read it. In the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And so here we have Jesus, the second member of the triune Godhead, the agent of creation, the one who's been around forever, the eternal God, Jesus, right? John continues, "And the Word," that's Jesus, "became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory is the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." And so just like that, Merry Christmas, right? The author of DNA wraps himself in DNA. He put on a body to draw near to us. Grace bombing requires that same thing, a body for sure, but it requires proximity to people, a closeness, a nearness. We don't grace bomb from a distance. And so Jesus first became near to us. Second, Jesus became deeply aware of human life and all the bad days that people have and all the struggles and all the pain that goes with it. Prior to his public ministry, Jesus was led by the Spirit to be tempted in the wilderness. And he was tempted in the same ways that you and I are. In his book, Grace Bomb, Pat Linnell talks about the temptations and classifies them and describes them this way. There was the temptation to cut God out. There was the temptation to sell God out. And then there was the temptation to call God out. Great descriptions of those things. If you read the book, and I'd encourage you to do so. But the bottom line is this: these are the things that we face all the time. In fact, Jesus was tempted and tested in every respect as we are. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 says, we don't have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So Jesus felt our struggles and he felt our temptations. He gets us. I was thinking this week about a time years ago when my dad was pastoring a church, and there was a guy in our church who got hurt. And he had had a really small farm and stuff. And my dad asked him, do you need any help? And the guy said, well, there's one thing I need done. And so my dad sent me and my brother up to take care of it. The guy wanted his pig pen cleaned out. And we got there, and he didn't have any pigs at the time, but he had had pigs for a long time. And there was a layer of manure in this pig pen that was almost a foot deep, with this crust on the top. And as soon as I poked the shovel down through that upper crust, oh man, it was a warm day, and all of the essence de peau, it came out all at once. I mean, it just stunk. And I mean, this really stunk. I used to work on a dairy farm some, and so this wasn't my first exposure to manure. But there on the dairy farm, I would stand kind of in the middle, and we would grab a shovel and we'd pull the junk, the manure back into the gutter, and the gutter would take it out and put it into the manure spreader. You could do it a bit from a distance. You didn't have to get right in the middle of it. This thing here, there was no way to do this job without getting right into it, and into it we did, and it took hours as we shoveled that out. I tell you all that because it's kind of a picture of, I think, what it was like for Jesus. Jesus, in order to clean up the mess that we made, had to get right into it. There was no way to do this from the distance. There was no way to come and to grace bomb us and yet stay pristine and clean, from a distance. Jesus got into it with us. He put on a body, and he faced the temptations and the struggles and stuff that we face. Sometimes I think about it like it's almost as if before Jesus left heaven that there was a big meeting or something, and they made a list of all the hard things that humans endure, and then put that on Jesus' bucket list, if you will, for when he was here. You think about all that he went through, the abandonment and the homelessness and the poverty and the unjust accusations, and the list just goes on and on. He gets our pain, our struggle, abandonment, bullying, hate, material temptations. He gets it all because he came, put on a body, and became aware of what it is that you and I live in and deal with. So he came, and then second, he listened to the will of God, empowered by the Holy Spirit. So Jesus loaded, and Jesus listened. In grace bombing, listening means to be sensitive to the Spirit's leading. And that's greatly aided by prayer. Jesus, throughout his ministry, he was constantly praying. And one time in particular, we have the story of when he was listening to God. He knew what it was he needed to do, what the grace bomb was he needed to drop. But he was listening to God, checking in with God, and was strengthened in prayer. I'm thinking of that time in the Garden of Eden. He knew what God was leading him to do, and he knew what it was going to cost. His grace bomb good work was to purchase salvation for everyone by dying for the sins of the world. And Jesus prayed that evening in light of his natural human weakness and aversion to pain and death. And he said these words, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared an angel from heaven strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Here Jesus was seeking the will of God. God, I know what we've talked about, but I'm checking in, Is it still necessary for me to do this? If not, if we can go about this another way, remove this cup from me, but I want to do what you want me to do. So Jesus was seeking God's will, but notice that he was strengthened in his reverent prayer. In Matthew's account of this last night of Jesus' life, we have these words where Jesus went to his disciples and he said, listen, watch and pray that you don't enter into temptation, because the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's the truth for us all the time. When we want to grace bomb, when we want to join God and do those good works that he prepared beforehand for us, like we talked about in our last session, The spirit is willing. We long to do that. We long to be on that whitewater adventure life with God, but the flesh is weak. We start thinking about, well, what if they don't like what I do for them? Or what if they get upset with me? Or they say something rude? Or they're like, I don't need this? Or what if I just can't bring myself to the point where I can hand the card? You know, what if? The flesh is weak. So we need to pray to do the right things that we know we should be doing. Listening in prayer and fills in the gap with God's help and strength. You know, I think about that. You know, we've got this gap between knowing and doing. Like, I know I should do this, but doing is really hard. What fills that gap? Meaningful prayer. Spending the moments with God. Say, God, help me. God, help me. I want to do what you want me to do. Grace bombers need direction, but they also need help to act, and meaningful prayer is the key to that. So Jesus loaded, Jesus listened, and Jesus let her go. His action steps were action steps to the cross to drop that ultimate grace bomb. And you think about those final steps of Jesus where he went from the Garden of Gethsemane and there walked to Caiaphas' courtyard, and then from there to the temple council, and from there to Pilate, the governor, right? And from there to Herod's court, and from there to Pilate's headquarters. And then there was the scourging, and then from there to Calvary, and then his final last steps on earth before the cross. And as you think about those steps and the agony and the time that went into that, his steps that he took should have been ours to take. As this is the path for payment for the unholiness and rebellion against God in which we all participate, but Jesus didn't. He was innocent. Those steps that he was taking were ours to take, but he took them. Isaiah wrote, surely he, that's Jesus, has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken and smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have all turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Jesus loaded with humanity. He listened to God and was strengthened by God in order to spread his arms out on the cross to say, I love you this much. Now, pardon me, I'm not able to show you that. My arm's in a sling, but imagine for me, my arms, you know, hands aren't close together. I spread as far apart as I possibly could. That's what Jesus did on the cross. I love you this much. When he let his spirit go and he said those words, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, the grace bomb was complete and became available for all who looked to him in faith. And since that day, God's leading edge is his kindness. And we get to love people this much and to point them to the Jesus who loves them this much, right? And is there a better way to introduce our neighbor to grace than through a personal, spirit-led touch of grace? So this grace bomb thing, it's a tool. It's a way to start saying, I love you because there's a God who loves you this much. As we wrap up our time together today, I want to just answer a couple questions that have come up throughout the course of the week. One question I got asked was this, Pastor Andy, is it okay to grace bomb nice people, or do we only have to grace bomb the undeserving? Because last week I told you a story about a person that I got to grace bomb who definitely did not deserve it. Yes, grace bomb whoever God lays on your heart to grace bomb, even if they're nice people. That's all good and great. Second, I got to ask, Pastor Andy, it's really hard to sometimes to get up the nerve to give the card. Do you have any ideas like of how I could do this? And I was listening to some of the stories that I heard this week of things that our people have done, and I thought they had some great ideas. So I'm just going to tell you what they did. One of our guys was at a restaurant, and when he went up to pay, he said to the cashier, hey, I want to pay for the meal of that table over there, and pointed to them. And so the person said, sure, no problem. So he paid for them. And he said, when you go over to there, would you let them know it's paid? And would you give them this card for me? And the cashier was happy to do that. Another person took a very similar tack. They were going through a drive-through and asked if they could pay for the person behind them and leave the card with the person there at the drive-through, and said, would you give that to them when they come up? And their thought was this, and I thought it was really cool. Even if the Grace Bomb card doesn't get passed on, perhaps the person that he paid has seen it, and perhaps something will register with them, because he mentioned to them, you can tell them, hey, go to the website, it explains everything. And so in some ways, it might have even been a double Grace Bomb, right? He left the idea in the minds of the person taking the money, but then hopefully to the car behind him. So those are some great, perhaps entry-level ways to do grace bombing. If you find it personally hard to hand the card to the person that you're grace bombing, that's some great ideas to start. I have heard of some other stories this week. I'll share with some of those with the weeks to come, but I hope that helps. Guys, I'm so excited about where God is taking us in this. I really believe this is the right tool for this time in our church's development as we go on mission with God, being deployed in very practical ways, giving gifts of kindness, unexpected kindness, along with these Grace Bomb cards. I can't wait to see what God does with this. I'm sure he's going to multiply it like he did with the loaves and fishes. Don't forget, if you've got stories, please share them. Go to the website, gracebomb.org. Send them to me. I'd love to have those. Share them with your small group. It's a great way for us to encourage one another to do love and good works. Praying for you. Let's go blow some stuff up this week. Let's grace bomb some people.